my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Land Stories Live, a podcast dedicated to helping people like you get land. And hopefully, our goal is to help thousands of people own land. I have the pleasure of having a guest with us, Kevin Casteel. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Dave, it's great to be here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a bit hot here in Bloomington, Minnesota. You're in Austin, Texas, right?
I'm in Austin, Texas. It's also hot here. We're looking at a toasting 95, and it's only noon. So
Oof.
we'll definitely get warmer from here.
It's pretty typical out there though, right? You get pretty hot temperatures out in Austin.
Yeah, it's the sacrifice of living in Texas. You have to get used to it.
Well, everything I've heard about Austin, it's just such a booming place. It's kind of quiet a few years ago, but really blew up the last 10, 15 years. You've been out there a long time. You've been seeing that change.
I've actually lived here my entire life. And so really through the last, you're right, 8 to 10, 12 years, tons of growth, lots of new people, infrastructure, a lot of businesses coming in. So it's an easy thing to complain about if you have that mindset. But I'm just happy to live in a town where people want to be. So it's not always a bad thing. Growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell me about your background growing up in Austin. What did you do for fun? Tell us about growing up out there.
Yeah, I grew up here. Really, Austin is a great place to be if you like the outdoors. Kind of in this nice, almost like the green belt of Texas, right? So Central Texas, we've got the hill country out here. So lots of rolling hills, some mesas, lots of rivers and lakes, kind of all around the Austin area here. And so, as a kid, really, I rode my bike around. We went camping a ton. I was in Boy Scouts, and so that was a huge part of it too. Always adventuring. My family really is a huge outdoors family, and so we didn't do typical vacations as a kid. It was always, camping here, horseback riding there, whitewater rafting there, and so really just soaking up all the time as we could in the outdoors.
And as you reflect on being a kid, what are some of your favorite places? Where are places you'd tell other people, man, you got to check this place out. It is so fun.
You know, Probably what immediately comes to mind is the Rocky Mountains. That was kind of our hub for vacations and just for leisure travel. And so probably Rocky Mountain National Park would be one of my top. Estes Park would be another one. And I also like the high desert. So I'd also recommend people go to Santa Fe and the Taos Angel Flower region of New Mexico as well. Just beautiful out there, and easy to travel year round with the climate.
Yeah, I told you beforehand, we just did a road trip. We were out in southern Colorado and in Crestone, and we went up the Great Sand Dunes, hung out out there for a little bit, went down south to Red River, New Mexico, which I had never been to before, which isn't too far from Taos and Angel Fire.
Mhm.
And we did whitewater rafting, we did ATVs up among the trees, lots of hiking. It was good times.
That's awesome.
Any particular things that you love to do, outdoors, your favorite activities? Are you more a hunter, more a camper? Talk to me about that a little bit.
I love to camp. I love to hike. I really will do it all, but camping and hiking is kind of where I find myself going back to the most. I love just the solidarity of being out in nature, especially remote locations where there just aren't other people and noise. I've got a busy job. I work in like digital marketing and tech, and so I'm always behind a computer. I'm always on the go and phone calls and Zoom meetings, and so I love to just unplug and be in a place where I can totally be with my thoughts, totally be in solitude. My wife loves to hike and she loves kind of cooler climates. So we often find ourselves, heading out to Colorado, heading out to New Mexico, bringing the dog with us, and, just spending at least, 4 or 5 days, hopefully more than that, just unplugged and enjoying the beauty that is nature. But I also like to hunt every now and then. I'm from Texas, so it's a big thing down here, and I personally am not a huge hunter, but I've got friends who are, and so we'll take a trip every now and then. Also, just love to be on the water, and so
Mm.
this past weekend I floated, tubed one of the rivers here in Central Texas, which is basically where you just hop in and float for a few miles and bring a cooler with you and just enjoy that. So always in rivers, always in lakes, and just trying to be outside as much as possible.
I could see why New Mexico and Colorado would be a great fit for you. Just getting out there. It was kind of interesting as we were hiking out there. I didn't know that New Mexico and southern Colorado in the mountains had a monsoon season. So we
Mhm.
were up hiking, going around, and it was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It started hailing on us as we were hiking,
And it always
and
comes out of nowhere.
it did. It sure did. And we knew it could rain, but we had no idea hail could happen. And it was a great story, but we made it back. We got right to the lake up there and went back. Do you have any kind of crazy memories, of just like, oh my gosh, we barely made it out of there alive, or animal encounters or anything like that you can share with us?
Sure, yeah, probably about 10 years ago, I was out in towards Cimarron, New Mexico, which is just a little bit kind of northeast of like Angel Fire, a little bit south of Red River in northern New Mexico. I was actually on a trip with my Boy Scout troop, and we had basically gotten to our next camp for the day. We were on like a 70-mile backpacking trip over the course of a week. So we'd gotten to camp, we had had everything all set up, and we're really just planning on relaxing for the rest of the day. And a few of us just had some extra energy. I guess the morning of hiking was not enough for us. And so we kind of just set off down the trail, said, hey, we'll be back in a couple hours. And basically, just about a mile into this, additional hike, we turn a sharp corner, and there was just the biggest moose
Mm.
I've ever seen. And looking back, it really wasn't that much of a panic moment. It was just a moose. Sure, the bulls can charge and stuff like that, but our initial thought was, oh my God, it's a bear. We were probably 4 to 5 feet away from it, and it was just a
Wow.
big, dark animal. And it was in that moment, everything that you've ever heard about like bear encounters, because again, I thought it was a bear, everything that I'd ever heard about bear encounters just kind of like fell out of my mind. Didn't remember what I was supposed to do. Didn't remember how, am I supposed to appear big? Am I supposed to appear small? Do I make noise? Do I not make noise? And I just froze. And then probably after about 10, 15 seconds of nothing, my friend was like, wait, it's just a moose. And we kind of just walked on by it. Um,
Nice.
so that was a fun one. It was definitely just the appearance of what we initially thought it was just stopped all of us in our tracks. And, what nothing I'll forget.
I love it. Well, that's so fun, and what a great memory. I assume, did you guys just back up? Did you walk past the moose?
We,
What happened?
yeah, we took a few steps back and just still kind of didn't make anything sudden. And it basically just kind of stepped off the trail and we just walked on past it. And it was a beautiful animal, huge, probably one of the largest like mammals I've ever been close to other than at a zoo or a situation like that. So super cool.
Wow, that is so fun. Saw a moose. We went up here in Minnesota. There's the Boundary Waters, which is this area where you can canoe around and you can portage from lake to lake, and there's tons of them out there. And we ended up taking a power boat, and we're going around some of the little lakes, and we saw a moose. First time I'd ever seen one in the wild. We weren't anywhere close to it. We were in a boat, but man, I totally hear you. Those things are huge, huge,
Yep.
huge, huge. So I'd love to know, you in this case, Kevin, you bought from um, Family Freedom Lands, one of our properties out there in southern Colorado. So it sounds like this whole area is near and dear to your heart, having been not too far from there, seeing a moose in northern New Mexico. How did you decide on that particular property?
Sure. So obviously we've talked a lot about New Mexico and Colorado and how we love to go there. And, my wife and I typically travel to that area at least 2 to 3 times a year, usually a couple of times in the summer to escape the heat. And typically at some point during the winter because we like to ski. And so it had been in the back of my mind for a couple of years, just that I would eventually want some kind of property. And I'd initially thought New Mexico, just because typically a lot of places in New Mexico tend to be a little bit cheaper, especially like in like the high desert. So initially I was looking around, the Santa Fe area, even as far north as like Taos and Tres Piedras area, and had a few properties that kind of like I had checked out over the years and nothing that just felt like, oh, this is it. Um, and, you know, long story short, in 2020, you know, the world kind of got flipped upside down, and people started spending a lot more time outside. And, you know, my wife and I actually both lost our jobs early in 2020, kind of around the COVID shutdowns, right? When businesses started shutting down and stay-at-home orders started going into place, and it was a bummer. But we eventually both got new jobs where we started working fully remote. And so during the last, you know, 12, 13 months, we just started traveling a little bit more, more of like work travel. And so, you know, we'd head out to the mountains. We'd go to Pagosa Springs, Colorado, Weston, Colorado, and just, you know, take a week and a half, stay at a cabin and kind of work remotely, have fun in the evenings and have fun on the weekends. And so as we kind of settled into that like remote work lifestyle, it kind of made us start to think, you know, maybe having a place to call our own, a home base, a place that we can camp, eventually, you know, build a cabin on.
Sure.
Maybe that's not, you know, too far out of the realm of possibility, especially now that we've got the flexibility. So I really just stumbled upon Family Freedom Lands. I'd never even been to the site. I found it through like a third party site that it, you know, you guys had a listing on, and was a little bit skeptical at first just because I hadn't heard of it yet. There was a few other land companies and brokerages that I'd kind of been going back and forth with over the last couple of years that I just had familiarity with.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the property looked great. It was in a part of Colorado, the San Luis Valley, that we love. We typically, you know, drive through there on our way to other places, and so we knew that just the topography of it we liked, the geography of it we liked, and it was a good location. Um, I remember I texted. There was actually a phone number on the listing, and so I texted it just to get some additional photos, and probably within 2 to 3 minutes, somebody, might have been you or someone else on your team, sent me a Google Drive link full of photos, you know, just labeled, you know, northwest view, southwest view, access road view. And I think at that moment I was like, okay, this place is legit. They definitely care to be organized and to take care of their customers' needs. And so that was definitely kind of the turning point for me, where I was like, this is a great piece of land, and it's a great company that seems like, you know, they want our business, and will be a pleasure to work with, and that was the case.
I love it. No, it's quite the process, and it's so hard in today's world to really know who to trust, and that's the reason why we do a podcast like this one is to let people tell their story and talk about land and do some education. Um, I'm curious to know, Kevin, did you kind of look at like the layout of the property? Did you see like a GIS map screenshot so you could see the outline and what that looks like and have a good handle of how that property compares to other ones around it?
Yeah, sure did. So, you know, that was obviously included in the listing, as well as a few other photos from the property itself. And it's always helpful to have both of those things. You know, one thing that I've seen over the last couple of years of kind of casually looking at land is a lot of listings will only have, you know, only a GIS screenshot of the property, and then other ones will only have maybe one or two photos of the parcel itself, or maybe just the surrounding area.
Mhm.
And so sometimes it's kind of hard to, as a consumer, to make a conclusion of whether or not it's a good fit. You know, if you can only see a GIS, you know, basically plot, that's helpful to help you know exactly the space it is, where it sits, you know, within the community or within like the subdivided area around it. But it's not always the most helpful thing for, you know, finding out, is, do I like the way it looks? Is it going to suit my needs? And so one thing I liked about Family Freedom is it was a combination of both. And when I needed additional images and resources, you guys were quick to get those to me, and definitely made it feel like I was standing on the parcel, and I wasn't having to jump to as many conclusions and guesses, basically, as to what it looked like.
I love it. No, that's great. I'm sure. I think it was Christy who was in touch with you, and
It was Christy. Yep.
Christy does a wonderful job. She's been with me, I think, 2.5 years now. So she's been around. She knows it, and thank goodness I don't have to do this all myself. It's something running a company, and I'm grateful to have great people involved with us. I guess Kevin, something else that I'm curious to know, um, when you look at something where, um, you're going to be spending time on it, you're going to be camping on it, or maybe building on it. Some people that I talk to really want to get a place that has no restrictions on it whatsoever. In the case of Costilla County, Colorado, this isn't part of an HOA. There's no third party beyond the county telling you what to do. But even the county, has some things. Hey, it has to be 600 square foot minimum if you build. You can camp on it a few weeks every few months. What was your impression, of something like that as you might be comparing spots? How did you think about, kind of just the restrictions and what you can and can't do on the property as you looked at this one?
Sure. In this case in particular, I think the restrictions were a good fit for what we're going to be using the property for. So we're not planning on, extended 6-month camping trips out there. And we're also not planning on using it as a place to dump, old cars and scrap metal and stuff like that. And so we're basically looking for kind of a home base for short-term camping trips with the goal of eventually, erecting some kind of small structure there. Now that 600 square foot minimum was actually something that was very attractional for us. There's a lot of other counties in Colorado and New Mexico that I've looked at that have like 1,200 square foot minimums to build, or even I've seen as far as like 1,500 square foot build minimums, especially in more um, like mountainous regions of Colorado where there's a lot of resorts and investment properties and stuff like that. And that's a pretty big barrier to entry for somebody like myself who is basically just hoping to put kind of a second vacation, you know, cabin there, right? The
Yeah,
jump between 600 square feet and 1,200 feet is pretty big. Your
it is.
your size is doubling, therefore your costs will nearly double. Um, on the flip side of things, having property that is totally unrestricted, I think for some people is very attractional, especially if it is something that they're intending to use like purely for recreation and for fun. Being able to, quote unquote, do whatever you want sounds pretty fun. But there are properties that I have looked at in New Mexico that I actually went out and drove out there on the way, to other places or on a road trip and checked out. And in unrestricted areas, and basically the neighboring parcels and neighboring lots were, you know, pretty disgusting. A lot of
Yeah,
trash, a lot
yeah.
of things going on. I've seen almost like what looks like a small private landfill on certain lots, and so it was definitely a good moment where I was like, I'm glad I didn't buy this one sight unseen. I understand why it's pretty inexpensive. But those are obviously extremes, but it is nice, I think, to have a few restrictions, just to make sure that the other people around you are respecting the land, respecting the others around them. And ultimately, it's just going to make it a more enjoyable experience when you do get to go out there and spend some time.
I agree. I agree. Although, hey, different strokes for different folks. I think
Yep.
some folks will say, "Hey, I hate HOAs. I never want to touch them." Other people say, "You know what? It keeps an area nice." And there might be other benefits that an HOA provides, or there's infrastructure in place or something like that. So,
Exactly.
but that's not for everybody. And this property, I think what's nice about it, I would call it kind of a tweener, whether it's not unrestricted, but there's not a lot of restrictions on it at all. But there are some, so I think as people really look at a property, they really gotta think about, what do I want out of it? And I think you address some of the cons of unrestricted land, that mean not just you, but your neighbors have unrestricted things that they can do with it, which maybe you don't care, and that's fine. But it's all about what fits for you. So I'd love to know, Kevin, if you were talking to someone about the process of buying and selling land, what are a couple pieces of advice that you would give to someone as they're looking to deal with us or anyone else?
Sure. I'd say first of all, just when it comes from a like scouting perspective of you find a property that you think looks pretty good, I would say before you even start to go down the rabbit hole of, learning about pricing or financing, just do your research. Go to every means possible to find more about the piece of land, the community it's in, the county it's in. You know, we live in a day and age where basically information is endless. And so obviously there's the obvious things like just searching on Google and looking at Google Maps and satellite images of the property. But you know, nowadays most like states and cities and counties and sub communities have some sort of, you know, community groups online, whether that's on Facebook or Reddit. You know, there are some different places that you can get into and maybe hear from other landowners themselves, hear from other people in the community what they do and don't like about the place. Um, and I think number two is if it's something you're really interested in and it's not too much of a hassle for you if you're already planning a trip nearby, go take a look. There's a lot of land, you know, for sale in the United States, especially in the West, and a lot of it can be hard to distinguish, you know, what you do or don't like about it without seeing it. And so, if you know, if the place you're looking to buy from doesn't have, you know, great images like Family Freedom did, you know, maybe that's something that you just consider part of your investment and spending some extra time and a little extra money just to go out there and take a look. And number three is I think find a place that makes you feel good about working with. You know, I think that if there are ever red flags or questions that pop up early on or just feelings you get, whether it's from their website, from speaking with a person, or even in an email exchange, you know, I don't think that's a good thing. I think you want to feel totally comfortable throughout the entire process. And you know, one thing I loved about Family Freedom is you guys were super forthcoming with all information every step of the way. I never felt like I needed to, you know, knock on your door and say, hey, what's next? When do I sign the next thing? What's coming up? It was always just right there and very timely. And so I think those are kind of the three things: do your research, um, get the best possible picture of what it's going to be like, and find you know, a company that you can trust and you feel good about working with.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Kevin, so much for spending some of your time with us today. I think those are some really good pieces of advice for anyone to consider. You know, really doing your homework, getting familiar with the county, and all of those things he mentioned. I think we have our 90-day money back guarantee with folks, and I think the reason why quite a few people exercise is because they often jump into something without really understanding it, which, you know, hey, we're happy to work with someone on that, but ask questions, just like Kevin did. You know, doing some homework and those sorts of things will take you a long way. Any closing thoughts, Kevin, you'd like to share with us in our conversation today?
Sure. Yeah. Well, you know, first of all, Dave, I just want to thank you for spending some time with me. I think this is just a testament to Family Freedom and the kind of business you guys do, is the fact that you're taking a little bit of time just to chat with me and hear about my story and how I ended up coming to you guys. And number two, thanks for having great you know, great value land for sale and making it an easy process for anybody to find and hop on and make a dream come true.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate that. Those are very, very kind words, and I really love conversations like this. You know, often I don't talk with quite a few of our buyers now, as Christy or Summer or Faith may be talking with folks. So it really means a lot to me to get to know you, and thank you so much for being on.
Of course, it was a pleasure.
All right, my friends. Well, that wraps up another episode today of Land Stories. Would love to have your feedback. If you have any particular questions that maybe future guests might be able to answer, please feel free to submit them to us. For Land Stories Live, this is Dave Deniston, and it would be my pleasure to speak with you. Feel free to check out everything on Family Freedom's website at www.familyfreedomlands.com. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good one. Bye-bye.